For the first conversation of today's program, I am pleased to call on stage Congressman Greg Stanton of Arizona. Joining him is Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill. Gentlemen.
Congressman, thanks for joining us. We've got three big events coming up, starting Sunday, of course, with the Super Bowl. Then we have the Iowa caucus, and then we have the State of the Union. A lot of Democrats are hoping it's President Trump's last State of the Union. What do you expect from that address?
Well, it's going to be an awkward time, obviously, to have a State of the Union while an impeachment trial maybe still would go on in the Senate. And what do I expect from probably similar to what previous State of the Unions have been? What I'm hoping for is the president really to talk about how he can work with Congress and the American people on issues where there's bipartisan support. We had a great example. Obviously, he signed the USMCA yesterday, a great example of the American people that despite the rancor that they may hear, we actually can work together in a bipartisan way. I'm a former mayor of a big city,
Phoenix,
so
yeah.
Infrastructure and transportation is my personal passion, and I've seen how successful investments can work in a city like Phoenix to really advance our economy. And we just introduced our plan yesterday, and this is another example where I think the House Democrats can come together with the president and work in a bipartisan way on a successful program. So that's what I'm hoping he'll focus in on. But do I expect more of the same, if you will? Probably.
When you go back home to Arizona, what are your constituents most talking about? Do they talk about impeachment a lot?
Well, look, the truth is when a member of Congress goes back home, you can hear what you want to hear depending on who you tend to hang out with. If you go to the local Chamber of Commerce, you're going to hear one message. If you go to your local partisan club, you're going to hear a different message. When I go to the grocery store, that's probably where you get the person on the street, if you will, their real opinion. Healthcare is probably the number one issue. I hear a lot about trade and trade-related issues. Arizona obviously is a border state, so trade with Mexico in particular is a hugely important issue for our community. So that's in the news a lot. So people bring that up, education as well. So the core issues that probably most members hear about. But when you go to your local Democratic club, sure, you're going to hear a lot about impeachment and those sorts of things.
Other than impeachment, transportation has been in the news this week. You serve on that committee. The House has unveiled a big transportation bill. Do you think that could get done this year?
Yes, and a lot of people thought the trade deal with Mexico and Canada was not going to get done. The differences were too great, et cetera. Look, we had a chance to work closely with Bob Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, who did a spectacular job representing the administration, working in good faith with all parties involved, including our caucus, the House caucus, and he cut a deal with us. And the president stuck with the deal, and that's why the deal got done. There's your perfect model for how we can get transportation and infrastructure investment much needed in the United States of America. Look, we're in a competition. I want, just like everybody in this room, I want the United States economy to be the #1 economy in the world for as long as possible. We're going to get that not by wishful thinking or osmosis. It's going to be real investment in infrastructure, real investment in education. And I think that what unites us, the president ran on infrastructure, one of his top issues when he ran in 2016. He's going to realize that model, but just with USMCA, can be followed with infrastructure. So I'm actually an optimist when it comes to that. And as a mayor of a big city in which I went to the voters when I was mayor of Phoenix and asked them to support a 35-year, $32 billion plan, that needed new revenue, and the voters overwhelmingly in a bipartisan way supported that investment. And Phoenix, with our investments that we've made in infrastructure, has had $12 billion of public and private investment along our light rail. If you haven't been to Phoenix, my city, it's been transformed that city in such a positive way. We need to do the same thing for the United States of America.
Now, the economy, by many measures, is doing quite well. But we also have record deficits. Should the transportation bill be paid for?
Yes. And that will be one of my criteria for voting on this, is that we have to have a pay-for system. And I think the idea, as you saw the announcement that was made just the other day, we're going to work closely with the administration and work in a bipartisan way to come up with a pay-for, and there's going to have to be compromise, and that's the nature of the business that we're in.
Should a gas tax increase be on the table?
Yes. And we've seen gas tax be on the table across the United States of America. Republican governors across the United States of America have introduced gas tax increases so that they can advance their states and do better when it comes to receiving federal support. Federal government needs to be a much better partner with state and localities around the United States of America. We haven't been nearly as much over the last few years. Cities like mine have had to go it alone, if you will. We need the federal government to be that better supporter, and we should not take anything off the table. I don't want to prejudge the negotiations that are going on, but certainly we'll be looking at things like the gas tax. We'll be looking at passenger facility charges so we can advance America's airports. We'll be looking at harbor maintenance fees so we can advance transportation along our harborways. And we got to have an open and honest conversation. My experience as a leader of a major American city is that when you have an open and honest conversation with the people you represent, explain to them that if they support certain revenue and it goes to benefit their lives, like transportation infrastructure does, people are willing to support that. I think the exact same thing will happen here in Congress. Has to be done in a bipartisan way. We have to come together on it. Some people think that's impossible, but I would argue the trade deal is a good example of how we can positively move forward.
These are very partisan times. Can you describe your relationships with Republicans? You're part of a big incoming class. You're new to Capitol Hill. The perception out there, I think, for a lot of people is that Republicans don't talk to Democrats and vice versa.
Well, I can tell you, I have a great working relationship with Republicans, particularly from my state. We're friends. I like them. I like them on a personal level. We spend a lot of time in airports together, hanging out with that flights that are often delayed from Washington back to Phoenix. So we have a chance really to get to know each other on a personal level, and that's important. Personal relationships are important in politics. I've learned that as being involved in public life for as long as I have been. And it was really important very recently for my state, for Republicans and Democrats to come together, not a high-profile issue, but there was an important drought contingency plan. A plan to help plan for the future of growth in the state of Arizona, make sure we're preserving more water. Drought is a huge issue as a result of climate change in Arizona, extreme heat and drought. And we needed to come together in a bipartisan way to support a plan that would help to better conserve water in the state of Arizona, do better planning. And we were able to come together on such an important issue for our state in a bipartisan way. Same thing on trade. I mean, our delegation unanimously supported the trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. So I would argue, look, we're going to fight on certain issues as we should, as you would expect. This is a partisan environment, but we're going to come together as needed to support Arizona issues in a bipartisan way. And everything I've done as mayor and now in Congress, if we can do it in a bipartisan way, it's the right way of getting business done.
Since coming to Capitol Hill as part of the class of 18, what has surprised you about Capitol Hill life?
Well, look, I have nothing to compare it to. I often get asked, what's it like to be a freshman in Congress on such a crazy year in which the House did impeach the President of the United States? And my honest answer is, I don't know anything different. I'm a freshman. This is the only year that I've had. Look, I've served as an executive, as mayor of a major American city. Obviously, coming in as a new member in an entity like this, it's a very different environment. Speaker Pelosi obviously does a great job keeping us organized, moving forward. And I think what I've been positively surprised on is that despite the partisan rancor, despite what we've dealt with, I also serve on the Judiciary Committee, what we've dealt with on the issues in terms of the relationship with the administration, it's just how productive the House has been in terms of the number of bills and the size and breadth of the bills that we have passed. We've done a lot of work, hasn't got a lot of publicity, but we've done a lot of heavy lifting, and I'm really proud of the work that's been done.
A lot of those bills, there have been hundreds, I believe over 400 that have passed the House, but a lot of those bills have not passed the Senate. What's the strategy there? Obviously, there's been a lot of pressure on Mitch McConnell, who's up for re-election. Are you hopeful that some of those bills will move this year?
Yes. Look, the reality is that we've passed over 400 bills. Almost 300 of them are bipartisan bills that are worthy of at least an up or down vote in the United States Senate. And I think the American people are going to hear that message over and over and over again, is that we on the House side have been highly productive, have passed a lot of bills that would advance American interests in the American economy, and people are going to wonder what the heck happened. And I do think that there will be an election toll taken if the Senate doesn't act on at least a few of these very popular and successful ideas that we've passed out of the House.
In that Democrats won the House in 2018, talking really about policy, not talking about impeachment. There have been some Republicans, including the lead Republican on the House Republican campaign arm, says because of impeachment, Republicans are going to win back the House. Most think that's an uphill battle. What do you think your party should be talking about and the presidential candidates this year?
Okay, I think we're going to be talking about the exact same things that allowed the Democrats to win the majority in the House this last year. I'm not a political pundit. I'm an elected official, so I can mostly talk about the race that I ran. I ran on my successful record as mayor of a major American city, but also we talked a lot about protecting the Affordable Care Act, my passion and desire to have real investment in transportation and infrastructure. We talked about immigration and how important immigration reform is to the state of Arizona. No city in the country, no state in the country would better benefit from real immigration reform than the state of Arizona. It would be an incredible shot in the arm economically for our community. And trade. As mayor of Phoenix, I was mayor. I was elected right after the famous SB 1070 was passed in the state of Arizona. And we turned our back on our relationship with Mexico, and trade went significantly down. We went backwards on trade more than any other state. As mayor of the big city, I personally went to Mexico 18 times to try to help repair that relationship. And we did a lot of training of local companies on how to do business with Mexico. I tried to send a message that we really value that relationship, and we were able to turn it around. President Obama gave myself and my city the E Award for Export Excellence. And so I understand how important trade is to our local economy, and I wanted to emphasize that. And that's why I was an early supporter of USMCA and wanted and sent a letter along with 12 of my colleagues to the Speaker asking that we do get that vote before the end of 2019. I'm really glad that we did. So those are all the issues that I ran on, and I think a lot of my colleagues ran on. On the issue of impeachment, of course, that's a very difficult issue. But sometimes in life, you're in a position where, you got to do the right thing. People ask me all the time, the politics of impeachment. Does it help Democrats? Does it hurt Democrats? I think my honest answer is, I don't know. But I saw the evidence, and in public life, you got to do the right thing. And so I believe it was the right thing, the decision that we made on the Judiciary Committee, and ultimately the vote on the floor. And I guess we'll see where the politics play out on that. I'm not a political analyst. My job is to vote what I think is the right thing, and that's exactly what I did.
Immigration reform is something that Congress has been wrestling with for a long time. The president wants to build a wall. What has the impact of that proposal done? What are you hearing back home with your constituents, as well as Mexico, and what should be in an immigration reform package?
Well, look, I represent Arizona. This is the state of John McCain, one of the greatest leaders that we've ever had in the country, let alone representing Arizona. Senator Flake was our senator. They were two Republicans that had the courage to come forward and be part of the gang of 8, I guess it was, that did propose a real comprehensive bill that passed the U.S. Senate by a wide margin and would have passed the House, but I guess the Freedom Caucus killed it at the...
Speaker Boehner never allowed it to
wouldn't have a vote because it didn't have the votes. That was the right model. You have appropriate border security. Now, I don't think the wall is the right approach. I think using more boots on the ground and technology is a much smarter and more effective approach to border security. But we have to have a comprehensive immigration reform, including a fair and tough path to citizenship for the people that have been here. Senator McCain led on it. It's still the right model today, and it would be a great boost for our local economy and the right thing to do.
Last question. 2020 presidential candidates, have they been calling you to see where you are? Superdelegates are not as important as they were, but there certainly could be important if there is a brokered convention.
And Arizona has a little bit earlier of a primary than we normally have had. We moved ours up to March. I would say presidential candidates have not been calling me personally. Obviously, a lot of the campaigns have been calling myself and other members of Congress seeking our support. I've kept my powder dry. I've known and worked with the candidates as a mayor for a long period of time. So I like a lot of them, but I haven't gotten involved in the race yet. I'm sure I will before the Arizona primary.
For the Arizona, you'll endorse a candidate?
Probably.
Okay. Last question. We had an event with mayors recently. Does Congress respect mayors?
Look, I would say in the transportation proposal that we just announced yesterday, I think there's going to be a real attempt to make sure that the money goes directly to cities or to regional planning organizations, not necessarily to the states. And I think that the approach that we took was that we want to make sure there's investment for urban infrastructure, but also investment for rural areas. In fact, one of the best things about the plan is the $80 billion that's proposed for broadband in rural areas and in tribal communities. I'm a big city mayor. I understand how important the urban areas are, but I also understand how important the rural areas are for urban success. It's not an either-or proposition. And broadband is so critically important for rural parts of America and for our tribal communities. So I think we struck the right balance, and I think we'll be working even more closely with mayors and local officials as we get this transportation and infrastructure deal passed this session.
We have run out of time. Please thank the congressman for joining us this morning. Hey, thanks so much.